Okay, looks like she's coming back on.
Hey, I don't know what happened, guys. I think we all got kicked off. So
It's okay.
huge apologies about that. That just kind of happened all of a sudden. Unfortunately, I think that might have killed our recording that we had for the webinar, but fingers crossed we'll be able to get it back.
I think it still says it's recording.
Still said it's
so
recording, but I think
hopefully we're good.
tried to upload as soon as we got booted out. So fingers
Okay.
crossed.
I
Zoom
was
is,
able to stay on. I think just you got kicked off.
No, it just it kicked everybody off.
That's okay.
So yeah, circling back to our question that we had about coaches, yes, those are managers. We just use different terminology at Help Scout. Okay, do we have any more questions, or let me see, I might have to.
Yeah, is for the engineers, is the engineering coach the same as basically a team lead? So it's their manager?
Yes, it's their manager.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You ready for some more questions?
Yeah, I just want to clarify real quick. So Help Scout, it's been a different setup at every company I've been at, but our teams are cross-functional. So we have teams that are aligned about different parts of the product or different initiatives. And on every team, we have a designer and a PM and engineering coach, and then some engineers that usually represent front end and back end. So API or Java and kind of more front end folks. So that's kind of our basic setup. So I work with 2 teams currently at Help Scout that have that setup. So
great. Yeah, so someone had a question about highly sensitive information and how does Help Scout set up a limited silo for some of this information. So some examples are things with consequences like stocks, insider info, SEC restrictions, or secret projects, I guess.
Well, just internally with our documentation and stuff, we don't really have a lot of we do have customers that we have to all go through kind of HIPAA training as part of our role, because we all interface with customers. So we have to make sure that we're not copying personally identifiable information about people. We don't really have a lot of what I would call industry stuff that's more enterprise,
highly regulated.
Yeah, we don't really have much stuff like that. But we do keep everything quite secure though, in terms of our authentication. Our VP of engineering does a great job of making sure that we're all in 2-factor and authentication, and there's lots of kind of practices around making sure that we're, when we travel, what we do with our laptops and our phones and stuff, so that information kind of doesn't get out there.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Switching gears a little bit, someone had a question, or Ellen had a question about when do you have cross-silo conversations towards keeping everyone aligned on customer needs and schedules? How do you conduct those? You mentioned keeping sales and marketing in the loop. How about other departments like customer support, operations, finance, etc.?
Yeah, we tend to have, it's pretty old school, but we tend to have a monthly meeting for what we call our customer-facing teams, where the team leads for those parts of the org kind of bring kind of trending issues to us to kind of make sure that we're aware of them, and maybe just check on timelines in terms of when we're expecting to deliver certain projects. The cross team even within engineering, we have a technical kind of program manager who works with us to make sure that everybody's staying coordinated for those kind of needs, and kind of just managing everybody's availability for projects and helping make sure that they're staged properly.
Mhm.
But,
Oh, this one's fun. Well, this person has two questions, and one is, do you feel like your team is more productive with most requests and processes being documented? And two, does the company ever get together in person for an offsite or an all staff meeting for retreat?
so I think that, and I'm biased, but I think that the folks at Help Scout are like the most highly educated about their product than any other like team that I've worked with. And I think a lot of that has to do with the amount of transparency that we have in terms of, I've worked in lots of different, I also have a background in design, but like I've worked with lots of teams in the past where if I went up to like some engineering manager wanting to know like, how does this work? Like, how does this particular feature work on the back end or whatever, you might get a lot of like, like, you know, information is power, I don't want to tell you. We have nothing like that. It's like everything is kind of out in the open, everything's documented in terms of our, you know, kind of our stack and the features that we have. And yes, we do have kind of team retreats. We do not, we had to cancel ours. We were supposed to be meeting in Dublin, Ireland, this year in March, and I think we all know what happened. I myself was already over there and I had to fly back home. And then
You almost got stuck out there. It was literally
I
the last day
literally the
that
last
they were
day.
letting people come home.
So I made it home. But normally we have 2 retreats a year, and you know, we're all looking forward to being able to do that again. But yeah, it is really fun to get to see people in person. And also we do have 2 offices, one in Boston and then one in Boulder, Colorado. And we normally use those for kind of when we do need to get together in person to have some type of sprint, or if a new employee is coming on, we usually on board together with like the manager and maybe like one of the other folks on the team. It just kind of helps to kind of at least start the onboarding process in person if possible. But obviously right now we're doing everything remotely, and it's been working okay so far.
Nice. Yeah, I'm always really jealous of your retreats because I guess if
Yeah.
you're not spending on office space and all of
Yeah,
that.
they're not cheap, but yeah, it's like a trade-off. Like we're not saving money, but it is really worth it, I think.
You went to Mexico
Yeah,
the
we went
time
to
before that,
Cancun.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the last one.
Gotcha. So, just on your first answer with documenting, do you also document your one-on-ones with your manager, direct reports? Is there a tool you use for that, or what do
Yeah,
you record that?
that's a really good question. Again, we use Dropbox Paper a lot, but I highly suggest having an agenda set up that's like a shared document between you and the person you're having the one-on-one with, and just have the date and have action items, and it's just shared between the 2 of you. But yeah, we tend to pretty much for every meeting that we set up, we try to have like a working doc that goes along with it.
Nice. Great. Let's see. In terms of your workload, do you think that the time differences lead to you having to work more hours than you would in a job that doesn't have that kind of remote aspect?
It's tricky. I would say no, but I would say that like um, our teams, like how I described, like we have these cross-functional teams. We try to kind of roughly have people together that where there's enough overlap. So being in the Midwest, we're kind of ideally situated where I can talk to people in Europe in the morning, and then I can also talk to Australia kind of like at the end of my day. But for kind of getting people together that are like in Europe and then also in Australia, that can be pretty tricky to do. And that's why I kind of came back to like, you can't default to synchronous communication. But I think in terms of like, I guess our approach is just different. A lot of folks I know, like some of the engineers in Europe, like they will like use their morning as their free time. and they'll kind of have more flexible time. We have a lot of parents in our company, so a lot of us, especially right now, are managing a lot of different things. So a lot of folks on the team kind of use their time, and they kind of split out their work over the day, rather than kind of having a dedicated block, myself included.
Gotcha. And speaking of the asynchronous and async
Synchronous.
and sync
Yes.
communications, do you have any more like anecdotes or advice about that, and also parsing out impact versus intent? I'm just diving a
Sure.
little more into that subject.
Sure. Yeah, I can try. I think what I've just seen in terms of like what happens when you have too much async. So I've seen this in other remote companies, where they really lean on their tools too much, and you won't be able to tell that someone's overloaded, or if something is kind of stuck and you won't know why. Um, just generally, it can lead to frustration, where someone, especially like like stakeholders, can dismiss things, just because they're reading something through comments. Whereas, like, if you had a quick meeting, they would understand the context more. So it's kind of like one of those things you kind of just, after you have more experience with it, you kind of usually, I just get a spidey sense for it when I see things that are, especially if you see like Slack threads where people are just kind of going back and forth and asking lots of questions, and it's like getting really, really long in Slack. Like, put the brakes on it, pull back, and see if we can get everybody together, rather than wasting a lot of time.
Yeah, that makes sense. If there's a lot of back and forth and things still aren't clarified very quickly, to just go ahead and
Yeah.
hop on a video call if you can.
And then the implicit versus explicit.
I think it was impact versus
Impact.
intent.
It was impact versus intent. Sorry. Yeah, I had a lot of like
Or
this
impact
versus that.
more than intent.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of just goes back to sentiment of, people can't really, it's hard to tell sometimes like how you're coming across. And so we actually use a lot of emojis. We have loads of different custom like emojis and like GIFs and things that we use to really kind of set tone, so people understand like that, like, this is like a wink, like, I know this is kind of silly, or like,
this is a joke.
yeah,
Don't
this
take
is a
it
joke.
seriously.
Like, I understand this part of the code base is a dumpster fire. It just kind of helps to like lighten the mood, and not, kind of also, and we also use it a lot to also help like raise our team members up to like really use those like emojis and reactions and things to make it fun.
Mm-hmm. And along those lines, you had a point about trying not to use DMs.
Yeah.
But in someone asked an example of if someone is holding an individual accountable in a public forum, what do you do in that case? Do you try and take it into a DM, or like have you had to handle that kind of situation?
Nope, that's a really good question. Usually it's up to the team leads to, like, our team leads are pretty much trained to not call out people publicly like that. It's kind of just like a core value that we're just not jerks. But for kind of feedback like that, we always give kind of feedback one-on-one, like whether that's like through a DM or through a meeting. And if it's between the kind of teammates, there's usually someone who's a team lead or something like that who's in the channel as well. And you just try to kind of nudge of being like, I see that there's like something to work through here. Maybe we should have a retro to like kind of work through the issues that we're encountering, and like let's kind of take it offline a little bit. But again, yeah, it's usually part of the role of the team leads is to kind of own that experience. So yeah, we don't have
Oh, that's interesting. So
people getting called out.
Yeah, they actually have training on how to handle these situations at Help
Hmm.
Scout as an engineering
Yeah, as a
manager.
coach. Exactly. Yeah.
That's great.
Mhm.
Is that part of their onboarding?
Um, I don't know. Yeah, I think it is. Like we have so we have, it's actually evolving. Actually right now we're working because the company's growing and processes and the ways that we are working are changing. But yeah, it's actually part of our kind of the way that we work, and it's all documented. And yeah, it's just one of those things that you kind of get in your onboarding a little bit, but also it's really just part of the culture of how we work too.
Hmm.
We're very the company is very, very respectful, and like kind of empathetic of others on the team.
That's great. And when you're interviewing candidates for remote positions, what characteristics do you look for?
I think you have to. It's a good question. I was really thinking about. So we don't necessarily look for if you've worked in a remote company before, although it is super helpful because it helps you if you've had that experience before, you kind of know how to set up your workflow, what you like about it, what you don't like about it. I will say remote work isn't for everybody, but people can make it work. But there are people that it kind of just really um, gels with. If I were to characterize a lot of our teams, we have a lot of introverts who might be a little bit more extroverted, kind of just in that range, and working remotely kind of works with them in terms of skill set, genuinely just curiosity, and we one thing to note is that historically we do not hire junior folks at Help Scout. So we don't have interns, we don't have junior folks. That might change as the company continues to grow, but for right now, pretty much everybody that we hire has a lot of experience already. So it's kind of folks that are already at the top of their game. So because that part of it, having to kind of train up somebody and also working remote is another
Hmm.
it's another thing on top of working remotely. So we are lucky in that a lot of the folks that join the team, this isn't their first rodeo. They already know how to execute. They already are pretty driven, and they are aligned with our kind of company values of kind of delivering customer delight. So
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like remote work definitely requires quite a bit of discipline, at least in what I've experienced transitioning over. At first, it was more productive for me, and then later I was like, okay, you have to keep setting the schedule and making sure that you keep in touch with everyone.
yeah,
Um,
block out your calendar. Really, really block out your calendar, even if it feels silly, even if it's just for you. Say from 8 to 9, you are just doing emails.
mhm,
Um, just so it kind of helps keep yourself accountable. Other tools I use beyond the ones I mentioned, I also use Todoist for my kind of personal to-dos. I use Evernote just to kind of make notes during meetings. But and then I also use Jira too, just because I spend way too much of my life in there. So I have
yeah,
kind of personal boards and stuff in there too.
totally. And if someone, is experienced but looking to transition to a remote position, what would be your advice for them?
Just do it. Honestly, I think I would actually read more about it first. I would read, read remote, go to the Help Scout blog. There's lots of resources there. Trello actually is another great company that's been mostly remote. They have a lot of resources as well. Um, you can kind of just kind of get a sense of whether or not it's for you or not. I do miss seeing people day to day. I'll be honest, especially during quarantine times, it's actually been pretty tough because before I had a social life to kind of complement the fact that I was just talking through Zoom all day. But now it's pretty much just Zoom, and it's pretty limited. So um, it's a change, that people have to adjust to. So um, yeah, I think there's no way to really trial out, like, unless you can like work as a contractor, but it's rare that you can kind of do that unless you're like kind of a freelancer. Um, but that's, I think for me, like that's kind of how I got my start, is I was working like, um, I was doing my own consulting agency, and I had like customers that were like based in India and stuff. So I had to kind of do a lot of that work remotely. But otherwise, yeah, just read
Hmm.
more about it, jump in.
Yeah, and I found that even enterprise companies, it's almost like you kind of are working remote. At least when I was a product manager at eBay, my whole engineering team was, one was in Portland, and then half of them were in San Jose, some of them were in San Francisco, which is basically long distance. And then we also had all the business teams across all the different regions. So it kind of requires a lot of the same skill sets that you just described. And some people who ended up moving to other states did end up working remotely full time. And because they'd worked in a setting where they were already working across different time zones, I think it was an easier transition for them.
Awesome.
Great.
Hmm.
So one more question on here is, how many people are in Help Scout overall? And and I'm thinking like as you grow, do you think your current processes will scale? If not, like for a remote company, how does that scale up when it grows?
Yeah, that's a good question. All I can really say is that we have to like continue to revisit. And like I was saying, we've just gone kind of through a whole exercise with several folks in the company to kind of reevaluate like what processes are or maybe not working. We made some adjustments to our onboarding process. Um, but right now we are, I think, yeah, I think we're about at 110 in terms of employees. And obviously like we are going to continue to grow, but we're not like a scale really fast kind of company. We're very kind of like profit focused. And right now like we are kind of hiring in a limited fashion just because of like whatever quarantine and corona, etc. um, but we should I would definitely expect like our teams to kind of expand in the next year. And yeah, it kind of just remains to be seen about like like would these same processes probably work at 1,000? I don't think so. And
Hmm.
I think um, what will probably happen is it will be basically just tougher to get like everybody from like across the org like into meetings, and it will just have to be a lot more kind of focused around particular initiatives versus like trying to like get everybody together just to talk about everything, which is kind of like what we have right now.
Hmm. Awesome. Someone had a question earlier. I missed it until now. Is a spec for capturing decisions versus instructions to developers for what to code?
It's both.
Um,
It's
okay,
both.
it's both.
Yeah, it's both. Yeah. So there's usually our specs are mostly owned actually by our designers, but I help to basically craft kind of the kind of business objectives, like how we're going to measure success, what the initial scope should be, what's out of scope, any edge cases. The designer will kind of lay out the things that we'll be creating, and then there's usually kind of like a technical part of the spec as well. But yeah, the decision log is usually captured in there too. It really does capture like kind of like all the information that you kind of need. And all of that usually gets broken up and then moved into Jira. Sometimes things do change in Jira. Like you'll come back 6 months later and update some text. So the specs they aren't kept up to date. It's kind of just like a moment in time for like that particular release, like that was what was involved. But obviously like with like iteration and testing and stuff, like things do get changed over time, in which case we Help Scout as a product, we offer knowledge bases and kind of documentation. So we use our own product every day. So we have internal documentation and external facing documentation for our customers that is like available through Beacon and also through like kind of a doc site or documentation site. And that is like kind of like the final say of like how something should look and how the customer should experience it.
Mhm. Awesome. Also, you mentioned earlier remote work is not for everyone. Who do you think it is not for?
I think personally, I have seen friends struggle. I've worked with, we've worked with actually like Mark that we worked with before. Like he always told me he's like a really gregarious, extroverted guy that like loved to kind of just like joke and talk with people all the time. And he had a remote position previously, and he was just miserable. Like just it. It's not that you don't get those types of interactions, but I know that for folks that are that really need that kind of it's hard for them to kind of feel like be able to have that self-discipline to like just like go into an office and work by yourself and not need to like go to like an office that's located somewhere, and also like kind of just always get that like feedback from people all the time. For me, I'm more of an introvert, and so it takes energy for me to talk to people. But I know like for extroverts, like they kind of get more energy out of that. So I know that can be more challenging. Our kind of one of our head recruiters, like Leah, like she's really she is actually pretty extroverted, but like she does a lot of things to like kind of counteract that, like in terms of like making videos for people and really doing a lot of things to try to stay connected with folks.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. The last company that I worked at with Julie and I both worked at this company. Back then it was called Jane AI when we joined, and then it's now called Capacity. But they closed their offices. They're slowly opening it back up, and I went to drop off my computer after I stopped working there, and they had just opened. It was like the first week they'd opened up the office for some limited amount of people, and there was like one guy there, and I just knew he was going to be there because his name's Dustin. He's the head of marketing, and he was just like, I need to be in the office around people, and he just has that personality. And he's actually doing a webinar just like this when I walked in. So
that's so funny.
Cool. Someone added another resource that I posted in the chat just now. Scott Birkin's book, My Year Without Pants. I haven't heard about it.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Have you heard about it?
No, I haven't heard of that one. That sounds funny.
That sounds like, my quarantine right now.
Yeah, you gotta have business up top.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't worry, I am wearing shorts right now, but they are shorts, not work pants.
Nice.
That's what happens when it's 90 degrees outside, right?
Totally.
And I don't want to pay a really high electricity bill. I think that's all of the questions that I see in the Q&A. Does anyone else have any questions? Send them in now. Going once, going twice. Okay, should we move on to, oh, wait, one new message. Hold on. Was there something in the chat? Oh, it says, thank you guys so much.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you for coming. Couple of updates. I thought there is a new women in product group. It's called Black Women in Product. It was just started this week. They posted it in the Women in Product Slack channel, and it should be posted on the Facebook as well. So, that's a resource that's new. The organization got a lot of feedback this past month about creating a new space in the group. So that's available. And they said even if you are not a Black women in product and you still want to help out or learn more, then you can email their email address. And I can also send that out in the email when I send out the slides and the recording. The Women in Product Conference is going virtual. It's October 20th through the 22nd. You can find the information online at womenpm.org. And tickets will go on sale later this summer. And then last but not least, unfortunately, I am leaving St. Louis to go back to school. I'm going to business school. I know It's no longer going to be Julie and Julie unless we find another Julie. But we do need another chapter co-lead. Julie Hammers will be staying on, thankfully, but we'll need to find my replacement. And so if you are interested in that, please email St. Louis at womenpm.org, and we will set up a time to chat with you to talk about what's required. We do require someone with product experience. Obviously, like I'm no longer a product manager, so that's okay, but ideally you've had some product experience. And yeah, we'll just set up some time and go over what is needed to be a chapter lead. Mostly it's about organizing events like this, and hopefully when the world opens back up, it can be
Totally.
in-person events, and finding sponsors for those events. So yeah, any other questions, just feel free to email us at stlouis@womenpm.org. And for those of you who were signed up on the Eventbrite, I have your emails, and so I'll send out the recording and the slides through there. Anything else, Julie?
I think that's it. Thank you everyone so much. Appreciate it.
Happy Friday. Have a great weekend. All right.